Does Monday at the office feel like a storm? Not with Microsoft Copilot. That feeling when Copilot gets everyone up to speed instantly? It's sunny again. When Copilot simplifies complex data so your teams can act, that sun's shining on a beach. And when Copilot uncovers hidden insights, you're on that beach with your people, and you find buried treasure. That's Microsoft Copilot. Learn more at Microsoft.com/AI for all.
What's up, everybody? You are now listening to the Success Playbook Podcast, where we talk about pop culture, life and career success, and of course, we're going to talk about who got dunked on the night before. I'm your host, Chanelle S. Reynolds, and I've been in the sports industry for several years. My goal is to take what I've learned from years of dominating the sports industry as a Black woman to help my listeners defy the odds and level up in life and career. Now, let's dig into this week's episode. Hey, what's up, everybody? You are listening to the Success Playbook Podcast. I am so excited about today's guest. I have none other than the Chief HR Officer at NASCAR, Mr. John Ferguson. Hi, John.
Hey, Chanelle. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm excited to be in this space and place with you, even though we are virtually. We have so much to share and discuss, but thank you for the opportunity to join your platform and your podcast. Absolutely. And every time that we connect, it's just so enlightening, so many thoughts, so much. It's a vibe, it's just basically a vibe is what I'm trying to say. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation. But before we dig into the questions, I'd love to play a quick game of this or that if you're open to it. Let's do it. Okay, so for our new audience members, if you're not familiar with this or that, I'm going to present John with two different options, and he has to select an option and tell us why, explain to us why he selected that option. Okay. So the first question is podcasts or books? Podcasts. Podcasts, okay. What are you listening to? What's your go-to? Let me pull out my phone. Well, there's a lot that I listen to. So let me give a little clarity. I am an avid book buyer. Mm-hmm, I am an avid book starter. Okay. I may not always come back and finish the book. Podcasts, I like Adam Grant's podcast, Rethinking. Okay. I couldn't think of the name of it. I started listening to Mel Robbins' podcast. A lot of culture building, HR type stuff. I also like some, pop culture, The Breakfast Club. You can never go wrong with it. So some of those things definitely stand out to me. I love it. Okay. What were some of the people and culture ones that you just mentioned? I have to add those to my list. Yes. The one is Scaling Culture Podcast. Maxwell Leadership Executive Podcast. There's one here. I don't know if they're still doing it, but I think they are. The Working Sports Podcast with Brian Clapp. Are you familiar with them? Yes. Yeah, I'm supposed to be on his show soon. Good. I did an episode with him, I think back in 2019, maybe. So that was really good. Those are the ones that stand out. And I'll tell you someone who I would appreciate if they did a podcast is Carla Harris. I'm not sure if you're familiar with her. She has been doing a lot more on social, and she has Carla Harris's Pearls of Wisdom. She is on Wall Street, a partner at Morgan Stanley. She is dynamic. If you ever ask me who I kind of fan out over, is her. It's her story, her journey, but the wisdom that she pours into people. So she really stands out to me. So I would love if she did a podcast. She's doing more on social, so you get little clips. But she has a wealth of information that we all need. I love that. And you know who I feel the same way about is Miss Valerie Daniels Carter, Dr. Valerie Daniels Carter. Okay. She's like an owner of the Milwaukee Bucks and the Green Bay Packers. Okay. Black woman. She was at the Black Sport Business Symposium, and she's active on social media now, and she's just such a wealth of knowledge. And then she sprinkles that faith in there. And that's how you get me. Like I am, because I'm so leaning to my faith. I'm like, wow, that was a scripture. I caught that. Yes. I need to check her out. Another one is good. So since we're talking about St. Marshall with the Mavericks, dynamic. If you haven't seen her in person, she's a person that when you meet her, the connection is genuine, even if it's only brief, and she's going to pour into you in some kind of way. I love that. I get that from her social content as well. Yes. Like, I'm looking forward to meeting her whenever I get the opportunity. But okay, I'm loving this already. All right, hot cereal or cold cereal? Hot cereal or cold cereal? I've never heard of hot cereal. What is hot cereal? Like oatmeal?
Oatmeal.
Oh, cold cereal. Okay. Like
Cold
what?
cereal.
Cold cereal. Give me some milk. Let me have my cold cereal.
Okay, what's your go-to?
I don't eat a lot of cereal.
Okay.
Probably whatever the kids have in the house. I have two daughters, 6 and 8, Maddie and Olivia. They are wanting everything that's sugary. So, Fruity Pebbles, the fruit Cheerios. Growing up, my mom would always make us eat whatever she had because she was like, well, I'll buy this box of cereal, but you won't eat it. And she was plain cornflakes. So I grew up just eating plain cornflakes, not the frosted, the plain. You had to add the sugar to it.
Wow.
So real old school in that way.
You grew up quick.
With some raisin bran, like, look, that's what you got.
I love it. Okay. Well, thank you for playing our game.
You're welcome. Thank you. That was fun.
Awesome. Well, let's get started with the question. So, who is John Ferguson? Tell us a little bit about where you're from and your childhood.
Perfect. So John Ferguson is a father, a husband, a son, a brother, a friend, a colleague. Many of those titles. But most importantly, I like to imagine myself as a person that's relatable in so many different ways. I'm from Greenville, South Carolina. I'm born and raised. I went to college in my hometown, Furman University, where I majored in political science. I was always a little bit of I was always involved in student politics, student government growing up, student body president. And so I got to college and I'm like, I'm gonna get into politics. It's not quite how it worked out. I did end up moving to DC after graduation. But the opportunities that were available were sort of limited and some of them were unpaid. And I don't know if you was like me, but once I graduated, I couldn't work for free. So I kept pursuing different opportunities, and that was where I landed and sort of fell into HR. And just kind of never looked back from there. So my first full-time role was with Hyatt Hotels. And then from there, I transitioned to Monumental Sports and Entertainment, where I was there for about a decade. And then in 2021, I became the head of HR, the chief HR officer for NASCAR. So I've had a pretty steady climb in my career professionally. When I think about how I've continued to be a sponge of sports, a sponge of the field of human resources, I'm a firm believer that you can never stop learning. And that's even proof that, myself and my 5-year-old at the time, were graduates of 2021. So I finished my MBA at Howard University. That was a major accomplishment for me, but something that I think happened later than I would have naturally. We try to plan our lives out. So I was like, by the time I'm 28, I have my MBA. It's not quite what happened. Life comes at you fast. You start to excel in your career. And so you're like, okay, well, things are progressing. But then I hit that point of trying to understand, well, if I want to make sure that I continue to remain competitive, what other tools do I need to put into my toolkit? Because I don't know if you share the same thought, but millennials are highly educated. And it's kind of like everybody we know went from undergrad, got a master's. So that's kind of common thread. But when you think about that, what it can continue to be your competitive advantage in that space. So I went back to Howard to get my MBA. But even before that, I went to Georgetown University, where I received an executive certification in strategic diversity and inclusion management, which you and I talked about briefly. And that was just an eye-opening and transformative experience for me. It allowed me to not only hold a mirror to myself, but to my community, hold a mirror to my organization, even like within family units of how people were reacting to how my behavior started to change as a result of what I was learning and the different dynamics and the spectrum that we're all just trying to find our happy place on. So that's a little bit about how I got to where I am. One of my life mottos is closed mouths don't get fed. And I sort of learned that very organically. When I got to Hyatt Hotels, I was working there and, first day I got my job, I'm excited because there were a lot of no's before I got a yes. So once I was at Hyatt, I was still waiting tables. My first 3 years out of college, I was waiting tables on the weekends. So I've always had this sort of work hard, hustle mentality. Like I can make a way. I'm in control of this as best I can be. But if it's up to me, I'm going to do what I need to do. But when I got to Hyatt, I had my first name on my name tag. And then I realized like the management group had their first and last name. So I was like, wait, well, why do you have that? They broke it down. And it's like, well, that's because we're management. I was like, well, I want my last name on my name tag. What I didn't realize then, and I would actively say this, but I was manifesting my desire for growth. I was manifesting my desire to do more and to contribute more. So when it came an opportunity for me to be considered for a promotion.
This episode is brought to you by Paramount Plus. Get in, loser! Mean Girls is now streaming on Paramount Plus. Join Katie Heron as she meets the plastics in Tina Fey's new twist on the modern classic. Get ready for more of the rumors, backstabbing, and jokes you loved from the original movie with some fetch surprises. Rated PG-13. Wear pink and head to ParamountPlus.com to try it free.
I didn't realize I had already kind of planted these seeds in people's mind. So they kind of naturally saw me in the path of growth and evolution. So I tell people closed mouths don't get fed. I kind of came to that belief organically because I was just saying I want my last name on my name tag. But in many ways, I was speaking into existence my desire for growth and to do more.
I love that. We're going to dig a little bit deeper into that philosophy. Just because, me pivoting from that revenue generation side, on the commercial side of the house, like it's a little bit more in your face. Like we're used to raising our hands and expressing our accomplishments and asking for more money and more titles and et cetera. But pivoting into this new sector that I'm in, this new HR world, it's like I'll say it's harder to navigate or express, when you're ready for that growth or that next step. It's not harder, but it's two different dynamics. So I definitely want to dig a little bit deeper into.
Do you want to do it now? Okay, so
all right, let's do it.
I think if you were in the revenue generating side of the business, you learned an amazing skill, and that's how to sell. Mm-hmm. At the most basic fundamental level of what I was doing at waiting tables was learning how to sell, learning how to market. Because I wanted to upsell you. I wanted you to get another round of drinks. I wanted that tab to get up to a nice place where 20% tip. You should be tipping 20%, people. That is what you should be tipping. If the service is good, let me clarify. But like, I think there's something about the level of advocacy and the ability to know that there's a quota that I have to hit. And so I need to use all my resources to hit that quota. And so that self-advocacy piece, because you're like, I got this goal, I got to meet it. I don't think you should lose sight of that even when you move out of a non-revenue generating role, because I think what you learn in the revenue generating role is business. There's so many people that don't understand business. And even when we're doing human resources, when we're doing diversity, equity, and inclusion, we're doing this all under in a capitalist structure in revenue generating organizations. And so there will be some intersections there where things just don't align. But how do you respond to that? How do you pivot to that? How do you find the silver lining in that moment? I think there's a lot of opportunity, a lot of skills that continue to lean into to advocate for what you want. One of the big things I always tell people, and I learned a lot through failure. Anytime I go into a role, one of my former leaders said, you have, when you come into a role, like your first year, you're really learning it still. Your second year, you may have the ability to kind of make an impact because you've been through one rotation. Another way I would put that is that you have 3 stages of a role. You're growing into the role, you're doing the role, or you're leading in the role. But during all those stages, you should be manifesting your desire for growth. So even in your first performance review, like, hey, let me understand the goals and objectives for my current scope. Thank you so much. What are some additional things you would like to see come out of this space? What are some additional outcomes? Then that next year, once you've mastered that, you have hit all those objectives, I would then say, what does growth look like? You have to continue to plant that seed in whatever leader's mind, because you are in the driver's seat of your professional development. I think a lot of times we give that power away. So many people will come and say, oh, well, my manager didn't tap me on the shoulder for this. Some people might get the tap on the shoulder, but a lot of us don't. And so I want you to know it's your obligation to be in the driver's seat for your career development, your career growth, and just speak it. Just talk about it. Because then people will keep you, they're like, you know what? Chanelle did say she wanted something. We might not be able to give her this, but here's another stretch assignment. Here's another committee she could be a part of to really showcase her skills to leadership. So I'm a big proponent of the self-advocating. I'm a big proponent of manifestation and speaking into existence what you want. But I think you learn a lot of those skills about all of that foundationally in revenue generating roles.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So don't lose it. Like it's still that, because we're all selling, because you're working in DE&I. So you're selling a new policy. You're selling a new event. You're selling a new outcome that you need the company's dollars and resources to support. That is selling. And I'm sure that has contributed to your success today.
1000%. Yes. So, okay. And you talked a little bit about stretch assignments, which is, we're getting into the meat of things.
Let's flow.
So you talked a little bit about stretch assignments. One thing that I'm noticing is that I'll say that newer professionals they seem to like shy away from that because they think that, maybe they're being taken advantage of, or, hey, this isn't in my job description. I don't want to do this. So like, can you tell us about the benefits of doing stretch assignments?
Yes. Well, there's a couple things that came to mind. First thing that came to mind was quiet quitting. Because I'm setting boundaries. That's not in my job description. We've had many aunties and uncles that were saying like, that's not my job.
Yeah.
I think there's a level of self-care in that exercise. But anytime you lean more in one direction than the other, there's something that you're giving up. So if you want to have a growth mindset, if you want to have a hot streak in your career, you want to grow at XYZ pace, then you can't remain status quo.
Yeah.
So you have to have the internal conversation with yourself. Am I cool with where I am? If I'm cool with where I am, like, let me just chill, then, set those boundaries. But if you're like, I'm trying to get to point B and I want to get there fast, then you can't have those same, you probably should broaden your perspective. I was listening to a brief podcast clip, and I can't think of the woman's name, forgive me, but she talks about recognizing that we are a brand. So what is your brand? What are the pillars that you're aligning yourself to? Because those stretch assignments allow you to grow your brand, but also introduce your brand to other people. And so I was quick to raise my hand. Hey, I'm happy to help with that because I wanted to learn more about the process. I can't, they say you can't hate from outside the club. If I don't like the outcomes that are being produced, I can't hate when I'm sitting on the sidelines. So unless I'm going to actively engage in the process, at least learn more about it, or try to put myself in a position to have a voice in some of the discussion and the decision-making process, then I can't sit on the sidelines and complain. So you got to figure out what you want. If you want to set those boundaries, and let me be clear, I believe in healthy boundaries. I don't think anyone should be taken advantage of, but we're also very much aware that sometimes you taking that stretch assignment is an investment in your future. And what do we know about investments? You may not immediately see the return, but it will come at a later time. So that's my perspective. And I think in sports, your network and your brand is key.
Yes.
So.
Yes. Yeah, 100%, because and you can attest to this, this industry it seems big, but it's actually really small. Before the call, we were just talking about how you knew a lot of people in my circle and I knew some people in your circle. So, and people talk. So your brand will go, it'll speak before you do.
Correct. So tell me this, what has your experience been with those stretch assignments? What's your perspective on it?
So I 100% lean into them. And I love how you articulated how, listen, if someone's goal is to be stagnant, and stagnant is not a bad thing. If you want to be in the same position for X amount of years, that's fine. If that's your goal, then yes, do the status quo. I hate to say it like this, but check the box, do what's listed on your job description. But if you are someone who wants to continue to grow, if you're someone who wants to elevate in an X amount of time, then absolutely take on those stretch assignments. I'll say me personally, how I got into my current role is because of stretch assignments. Okay. This had nothing to do with the current scope of my job at that time. Like I said, I was in revenue generation, and then somehow DE&I chose me, right? DE&I, it opened the door for me to be the first person in this role for my company. So it came through stretch assignments. Okay.
And one thing I will say don't ever let someone take advantage of you. So that goes back to the self-advocacy part. So now if you've seen that you're doing a whole lot more, you need to have a conversation like, hey, I feel like my role has really enhanced and evolved from what we initially designed. Mm-hmm. But you got to be there making an impact, doing the work and adding value before you kind of have that level setting conversation. What I do know is that a lot of people don't, they fear having those conversations. And if you're not going to advocate for yourself, nobody will. But you can't have that until you actually produce something of value and made an impact. So get the stretch assignments. It's kind of like you setting up this case for like, yo, I'm here. And I've done all of these things. Now let's talk about some things that are meaningful to me. Can we talk about how this will play into my future growth into the company? I saw this opportunity. Then I'm also a firm believer sometimes we got to go to grow. Because I think if you stay there and then you start feeling that I'm giving, but I'm not seeing the return on that investment, that's where you got to have the.
Hey, it's Kaylee Cuoco for Priceline. Ready to go to your happy place for a happy price? Well, why didn't you say so? Just download the Priceline app right now and save up to 60% on hotels. So whether it's Cousin Kevin's Kazoo Concert in Kansas City, go Kevin, or Becky's Bachelorette Bash in Bermuda, you never have to miss a trip ever again. So download the Priceline app today. Your savings are waiting.
Go to your happy place for a happy price. Go to your happy price, Priceline.
Those conversations internally, or the conversation internally to your organization, or the conversation internally with yourself to figure out what's your next move.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And what I'll say too is like with those stretch assignments, it sounds like to me like we're talking about that credibility piece, right? Like doing those extra assignments and knocking it out the park. It's building your credibility so that now you can approach your boss and say, hey, I think I should be doing X, Y, Z. So I'm a firm believer of establishing that credibility and then kind of, asking for what you want, asking for what you think you deserve. So
I like it.
Awesome. So what strategies have you employed or do you currently employ to maintain, of course, the culture of NASCAR, maintain, what you all have, this historic brand, but also you get DE&I, right? You understand the need for DE&I and for it to be incorporated into the DNA of NASCAR. So I would love to hear how you're kind of keeping the culture and the history, but you're also embedding DE&I into some of what you all do.
Yes. So the thing about NASCAR is that we're celebrating our 75th season this year. So that's 75 years in the fast lane. So it's a very, historic moment for the sport. And so much has happened over those 75 years. But what we're most excited about is where we're going right in front of us. And that's the powerful piece. I think so much of what the opportunities at NASCAR, they really consist around exposure to the sport. Because there was a point in time where some people may have not felt that the sport was for them, or had whatever perceptions of it. But now it's a new day. It's a new time. We have different players in the sport, different leadership in the company. And we really want you to take a pause and check out NASCAR, because when I think about, I can speak for the Black experience, so much of what we like and enjoy in our spare time, you can get all of that at NASCAR. I mean, you have good food, you can have a beverage. It can be family. It will be and can be a family friendly environment. There's fast cars, there's loud music. So it's a lot of fun. I like to say, a race that can feel not like a homecoming, but it can get there. With just the amount of activations that are happening. So I think the biggest moment is making sure that we lean into all that we have learned over 75 years, but we use that to propel us forward into the future of the sport. And the future of the sport will only continue to grow it will not grow unless we continue to bring new people into the space. And so when I think about some of the internal things, I think the biggest key to being an effective DE&I practitioner is your ability to build and manage relationships. Because unlike other functions in the company, you as the practitioner are the greatest tool and resource that you have. And I've always learned that I got to keep the door open with you. Even if you disagree, I don't want to close the door on you, and I don't want you to close the door on me. Because if we do that, now no progress will be made. And so let's keep the door open. Let's keep those lines of communication open. And let's know that sometimes these conversations are going to be uncomfortable. But that's okay. Because what I also know is that when we talk and share more about our lived experiences, we're going to realize how much more we have in common. So much more. And I think once we realize those common threads, I like to call them connective tissues, we have greater grace and greater empathy. And we have a greater ability to be transparent with the individual. Because I've had some of the most powerful conversations with people that I may not at surface level would have perceived I could have even had that level of a conversation with. So for NASCAR, it's about building those relationships, because I came in as a new CHRO, and so I had to figure out, how do I connect with this group of people? Because I'm the outsider. So how do I get in and connect with them to feel like I am an insider, but also to be seen as a part of the group? Exposure. And I think there's a lot to do with the D&I space, is also making sure that people understand your business. Because at times there will be things that may not align, but I think we have to do a better job of making sure that people understand why there may be some misalignment. Because there's a larger strategy at play here. And I think sometimes when you're at the lower levels of the organization, you only see what's right in front of you. And so I think I'm really big on making sure that people understand the why. And as we look at the generational mix in the workplace shift, as Generation Z comes in, they're really big on the why. Help me understand. And so we're going to have to do a much better job of standing by that. The other thing about the things that we're doing at NASCAR is we're being very, very intentional. And you have to be intentional. And it can't just be lip service. So one of the things I think a lot of people don't recognize is that NASCAR's had the longest standing diversity internship program in all of sports.
Wow. Okay.
Over 20 plus years. Before 2020, before 2015, when that started really kind of impacting the sports space, NASCAR had a diversity internship program. Terrence J was a NASCAR diversity intern.
What?
The summer before he went on 106. It should be. I don't know what it said, but it's out there. Because our VP of Diversity and Inclusion, my colleague Brandon Thompson, they were interns the same summer.
Oh my goodness.
And he remembers, Terrence was like, yo, I got to go to New York because I'm auditioning for this show called 106 in Park.
That is so funny.
So there's a lot of good work that has been going on in the space, but there was a lot of work still needing to be done. So let's be clear there. There was a lot of things about the sport that would turn off people. One of which would be just the presence of the Confederate flag. And so for me, that was something that I needed to make sure I understood how that decision came to be, what the path forward was before I would consider the opportunity. We got to have those are real meaningful conversations. And what I can tell you is that we had very open, very candid dialogue, and understanding the journey to that moment, but almost the instant impact that we saw of our fan base shifting, changing, new people coming into the sport. And so I think the way of growing and having a competitive advantage is making sure that your workforce, making sure that your whatever your type of business is one that is viewed as inclusive. And I think NASCAR is on the right track. And I don't think we're separate from a lot of the other sports leagues and teams that are out there. I think sometimes people are like, well, it's that group. No, we're all on a very similar journey, whether you're in sports or in corporate America. Because if we weren't on this journey, we wouldn't be having this type of dialogue. And so the biggest thing is just using your platform, using your voice, but also making sure that you're driving outcomes that not only impact your internal client group, HR and the employees are my clients, but also our external clients. So it's an exciting time to be in the sport, and there's a lot of growth and opportunity for us to continue to propel forward.
That's amazing. I'm actually still in shock that you all have the longest standing diversity internship program in sports. I had no idea. Yes.
And so this summer we just had probably 30 or 35 students from across the U.S., various backgrounds. And we have them not only placed with NASCAR, but they will work with some of our race teams at some of our racetracks. So we really look at our D&I strategies is focused on the entire ecosystem of motorsports within our world. So not just at NASCAR proper, but our teams, our research and design center, racing electronics. And we do a lot at NASCAR. I think you just kind of watch the race on TV and you see the cars going around the track and you kind of, oh, that's it. the technology. We have doctors, we have engineers, all the car design itself is built internally. Those are patents that we own and just develop. That the technology, the earpieces, the helmets, all of that is owned by NASCAR. So our company has a wide footprint. But the work that we're doing in DEI, we're going beyond NASCAR. We want to touch all of our partners, all the people that help us execute race day, from our original equipment manufacturers to the race teams again. So it's beyond our walls. We want to make sure that it vibrates throughout the ecosystem.
So someone was telling me, I forgot, I don't know if it was you I was having this conversation with, but someone told me that, when the car finishes their laps and they have the individuals that come up and take the tires off and change the tires, they say that they usually recruit like former football players for those types of roles because, they're strong and they can do it quickly. Is that a thing? Is that accurate?
That's true. So that's our pit crew. The pit crew typically has a lot of former D1 athletes. So it was interesting, me coming from what they call in motorsports, stick and ball sports with hockey and basketball. My first race day, I'm like, okay, the big guy, that's the driver. They're like, no, that's not the driver. I'm like, well, who is it? They're like, that's the pit crew. The drivers are like average height. Like they're not I'm coming from basketball. So I'm like, anybody 6'5" is a player. Like, where's he at? And so you see 6'5" folks.
What's poppin', guys? It's JG here from Blowing Smoke. If you're a fan of fun, insightful, and breakthrough conversations, then be sure to check out and subscribe to the Blowing Smoke podcast, a show that covers life experiences and firsthand testimonies from some of the biggest names in your favorite industries. And all that brought to you exclusively by the Revolt Podcast Network, anchored in hip-hop, powered by creators.
But they are the pit crew. So they're the tire changers. They are the ones that are doing something with the windshield or modifications to the car. We even have women in the space as well. Brianna Daniels is one of our Black women who's a pit crew member. And you can also make a very good living by being a part of a pit crew. So we have our Drive for Diversity program, and we have our Pit Crew Academy where we go out and sort of scout talent and show them the opportunities that could exist for them in this space of NASCAR and being on a NASCAR team.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. Okay. I'm learning so much. So I remember about 2 years ago, maybe last year, I was at a conference and it was one of the first times I ever heard you speak. And you made some really good points about code switching and how it's pretty much dangerous for the Black employee to code switch. So I'd love to talk to you a little bit about that and maybe some of your experiences, if you have them, with code switching.
Well, code switching. For me, we always code switch though. And even people who don't know the word for it, we do it because who I am with my mom and who I am with my fraternity brothers may be slightly different.
Yeah.
Who I am on vacation and who I am at the PTA meeting may be slightly different because there's a time and place for everything. Mm-hmm. It also relates to your authentic self, but I don't want you to see me with my mom at a PTA meeting with my fraternity brothers or wherever else and not recognize me for who I am. Mm. So the true essence of me should be woven through all of those experiences. There just might be other elements or dynamics that may be more amplified or maybe more suppressed. So I think you never lose the core essence of who you are. But I think there's a time and place for everything. Because, you get the question of, well, do you feel like you can be your authentic self? Probably not. And that's not anywhere, because I think my authentic self is my inner dialogue. Like nobody but me experiences that inner dialogue. Right. Because even when you're with your closest people, there's a level of dialogue that you have internally that could be a myriad of things, but nobody knows that but you. Mm-hmm. And so code switch, I think it has its place in its time, but I don't think it's as big and dramatic as some people make it seem, because we do it subconsciously. Right. It's kind of like, you pick up the phone, you don't know this number. Hello. And if it's your home, you're like, what's up? So it's a completely different dynamic. But I think it goes back to, my mom was a firm believer in raising us, my mom and my dad. Like, there's a time and place for everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is my perspective on code switching, and even the notion of being your authentic self.
Yeah.
So what has been your experience with that, or what's your reaction to it?
So I love that piece, that caveat. As long as you're your authentic self, you're good. But yes, you may have different experiences of Chanelle, because Chanelle, who's leading a DE&I training, it may not be the same Chanelle who's at homecoming, Delaware State University, So yeah, there are different dynamics. There are different facets. I am the same Chanelle, but you may have different experiences with me. So I like the way that you put that.
Thank you.
I think just where we may where some Black professionals may fall short is when they try to change who they deeply are to fit into this corporate mold or to this sports world mold. That's when you begin to lose yourself. And that's when you begin to have negative experiences.
Yes. I actually had a conversation with an employee a couple weeks back, and she's having some challenges at work. And we were just talking, and she said, well, I'm really trying to change myself. And I stopped her right there. I said, no one is asking you to change who you are.
Mm-hmm.
That is the beauty of who you are and the value that you add to the company. So no one is asking you to change who you are. They are asking you to change your communication style. So I want you to understand that. So because the way she was saying it was like, I'm not worthy. All of me is not good enough. No, we hired you for a job. You've been here. You've been successful. But there's been a wrinkle around your communication style. So I don't want you to misinterpret this, that we're asking you to change yourself. That is not it. We're asking you to adjust a behavior that's your communication style. And so I said, now, do you understand like the difference I'm trying to present? And she's like, no, I really needed that. Because I don't want you to change yourself. And I feel like if you're in an environment where you feel like you have to change who you are, which is beyond a behavior, then you need to assess where you are.
Yep.
Because I think sometimes, and I'll say a lot of times in sports, we become complacent because we've always wanted to work for this league, always wanted to work for this team. And so we get so consumed by I got the dream company, but maybe that dream company doesn't align with who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm a big proponent of, you got to do some self-reflection and assessments every once in a while to figure out, am I in the right place where I can be fulfilled and where someone's watering me so I can continue to grow and develop? But if I've reached a point where I realize that's not the case, I don't have to be hostage here.
Exactly. That part.
I'm in control of my destiny. So, because a lot of times you're knocking on this one door and they keep saying no, no, no. But there are two doors over here that are wide open and saying, come talk to us. We got what you want right here. We got what you want. But they're so caught up in what's right here.
Yeah.
So I'm a firm believer in, I don't ever want anyone to change who they are.
Mm-hmm.
There's a time and place for everything. But if you can't be who you are, then you just need to assess the environment in which you're in. And that doesn't make your workplace, I don't think, necessarily good or bad. It's just not the place for you.
Exactly. It might not be a fit, and that's okay. I always love the way you put that. Thank you for that. So, John, of course, being the head of HR, having a longstanding career in sports, I'm sure you've came across maybe different resumes or different interviews. I would love to maybe get your advice on how you can stand out in an interview, because we have so many listeners who may be trying to get their big break into the industry. What's some advice that you can give us on how we can get our big break into the industry?
Okay. The power of LinkedIn. I'm telling you right now, LinkedIn is where it's at. I'm an avid, I follow on social media. I think if you've heard me on anywhere else, I do like a good TikTok. But LinkedIn is where the money's at and where the opportunities are. So I'm constantly on LinkedIn, whether that's congratulating someone, sharing some information, consuming some information. So, but it's also a direct line of contact for people that you may not otherwise have that contact.
Mm-hmm.
So first life hack, pro tip, personalize your invitation. If you're going to send me a connection request, do the little extra step to find the little button that says personalized invite and personalize it. Hey, I heard you on the podcast with Chanelle. I really enjoyed what you said. I love to connect. I'm going to add you. For me, I'm protective of who I add simply because I want it to be somewhat genuine of relationships that I actually know. So if I don't know you, but if you introduce like how you became aware of me or the connection, that helps. And so personalize the note. Also start just using it to observe how other people have climbed in their career.
Yes.
Because there's a version of my career that's on LinkedIn. There's a version that is not there. Like I don't talk about that. When I first got to DC unemployed, I worked at DSW Shoes. I waited tables at Uncle Julio's Rio Grande Cafe. I also worked at FedEx Field as a concession stand manager on game days. They gave me like $100 on a game day. And I said, I'm on my way.
Oh my goodness.
I had those jobs and then I started working full time at Hyatt. So I was like 4 jobs at one point. Then essentially I had to let something go just because I couldn't manage all the schedules. But like, that's the part that's not seen on my resume.
Yeah.
It's not on my LinkedIn, but there was a grind through all of that. And so but I think it's important because I think when you're on the outside or when you're new in your career, you think like, wow, Chanelle and John just went straight to the top. No. I want you to see the rough drafts. I want you to see the edits because what we put on social media is just a highlight reel. I want you to understand there was a lot of saved drafts that never made it to that spot. And so set up those informational conversations. That's where I'm going with this. And the most powerful question and the most informative question you can ask someone, because if you set up an informational, you should be leading the conversation is, can you tell me how you got to where you are today? Because you're going to find a different path that you didn't even know existed.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
Little Wing is now streaming on Paramount Plus.
I'm in a period of emotional upheaval.
Is that all the I don't care crap?
A little adventure.
Where are you going?
I'm gonna steal a bird from the Russian pigeon mafia.
Let's do it.
Goes a long way. Starring Brooklyn Prince with Kelly Riley and Brian Cox.
Life can hurt, but life is sweet.
Little Wing, rated PG-13, may be inappropriate for children under 13. Now streaming exclusively on Paramount Plus.
That's where the relationship piece comes in. And then when you build that relationship, when you network, that's networking. To build that relationship, you want to figure out a cadence of staying engaged with those individuals. And that's where I come back to the power of LinkedIn. I can comment on your post, like, share, whatever, repost. But then I can say, hey, I read this article. I saw you were quoted. Congrats, XYZ. But that's how you stay on someone's radar. So when I'm hiring another entry-level person, I'm like, you know what? That Jake guy, Jake, hey, I know we ain't talked in a while, but I got this opportunity. Would you be interested? Because so many times people will come to me with like, hey, you got any referrals? And I'm like, I'm drawing a blank like on names. So sometimes I get on my LinkedIn like, oh yeah, this young man, this young woman I spoke to, let me share this with them. And so I think that's one of the life hacks. I think handwritten notes or just thank yous have just faded away.
Mm-hmm.
If you're interviewing with somebody, thank them. And I think the handwritten note, just by how information and technology allows other things to move so much faster, may be too slow. But if you can mail it to somebody, I'm telling you, that will set you apart from the rest. And what it tells me, even in an email or handwritten, is how you would treat my clients, how you would treat your colleagues. It's that extra effort. It's the extra inch. What's going to make you stand out? Because firmly, I believe that so many of these candidates are equally yoked. Everybody kind of looks the same on paper. So I'm trying to figure out what makes them different.
Yep.
And so it's that allow you to stand out. Another thing, when you go in there for interview, do your research on who you're interviewing with.
That part.
I'll never forget. This was years ago. I was in sort of a recruiting capacity. I'm trying to hire a partnership marketing manager. And so I'm doing 20 interviews. And if you ever had an interview, after like interview 5, they all kind of just start to sound the same. And so you're just, because you're asking a consistent set of questions, you're getting semi-consistent set of answers. But at the end of the day, you're trying to take your notes, like who stood out from this 20 conversations? Typically, it's the ones that establish a personal connection in some kind of way.
Yeah.
And it don't have to be anything deep. Like I'll never forget this same interview slate. Someone was like, hey, I saw you went to Furman when I was looking up your LinkedIn. I was like, yeah. They're like, well, my neighbor went to Furman. They didn't go to Furman. But like that stood out to me Because at the end of the day, I was like, yo, I remember, Jane Doe who said her neighbor went to Furman. Like, that was what stood out. And so now that name is resonating and standing out. So do your research, try to figure out a connective tissue or a connection point that will allow you sort of to rise above the other stories that have been told. So those are just a few of my recommendations. Don't be afraid to ask for an information interview. Build your network. Be mindful of your brand because the speed and rate in which information travels, you don't want anything negative to be out there.
Yeah. Well, that's been some great gems. All of those have been some great gems. I got so much joy in my spirit hearing about your start at FedEx Field and DSW and selling shoes because, I love the glitz and glamour. I love hearing about, these big companies, but I also love hearing about the grind and the hustle. And when people aren't where they feel like they're supposed to be, but then they end up, at that ultimate place. I love hearing stories like that.
Thank you. And I want everybody to know a lot of people have stories like that. A lot of people have stories like that.
Listen, nobody was checking for your girl when I was working at Nordstrom with a whole bachelor's degree, selling shoes.
Yeah, all of that. But I think you gotta recognize there's a journey, and I think lessons and the joy are in the journey because that's what leads you to a testimony.
Absolutely.
Because I think of Mike Jones' song. Back then, they ain't want me. Now I'm hot. They all up on me, and there's something spiritual about that.
Absolutely.
There were a lot of no's that I got in my career, and I still will receive no's. But throughout my journey, I've understood what it's like to be resilient. I've understood that there will always be a new day, and I've understood that what is for me is for me.
Yes. Okay, in closing, so what advice would you give to your younger self?
Life isn't scripted. I think I was probably needed all the gems I just shared right there. Because when I came out of undergrad, it was bad economy. I was getting a lot of no's, and so you sometimes might let a little self-doubt sink in. I don't think I had self-doubt, but it was more challenging than I maybe would have anticipated. So I would tell myself to flow to where the opportunities are, and build good relationships. And stay curious.
I love that. Well, that's a perfect note to end on. Thank you so much for your time, John. This has been so enlightening for me.
Oh, Chanelle, I appreciate it. This is a lot of fun. We got to run it back.
Yes.
So let me know when you get to season, I don't know, XYZ. We'll come back and do a recap. But this has been a lot of fun. Congratulations on all of your success.
Thank you.
I'm not going to lie. If y'all not following Chanelle on LinkedIn, she has her Tuesday tips. She has a wealth of information. So if you're trying to break into sports, I suggest you follow her. But because you're giving tons of gems away, and you're being very intentional with that because you're also building your brand. And so if you didn't learn anything today, understand that you are a brand. Everyone listening, everyone participating, and chase your dreams. Never give up. So thank you for the opportunity, Chanelle. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you, John.
What's up, everybody? I'm your host, Dr. Shonda.
And Chanelle.
And we're here from
the Double Dose Podcast. We are one set of twins
with two different perspectives.
We both have faced many challenges in career,
life,
and relationships.
And we are transparent about how we've relied on our faith to overcome them.
If you want to hear us discuss current events,
pop culture,
and relationships,
and everything else in between,
tune in to the Double Dose Podcast. And it's brought to you exclusively by
the Revolt Podcast Network.
Anchored in hip hop, powered by creators.